House Community Kickoff meeting. We appreciate you all coming. So I'm going to read out the script for a little bit, and then we will start the presentation. So welcome and thank you for being here tonight. My name is Matt Fiber. I am the county's site plan review supervisor in the Department of Community Planning, Housing, and Development with Arlington County. Tonight we wanted to share with you an overview of the site plan proposal for the River House neighborhood. We wanted to explain the review process that is just beginning and give you an opportunity to ask general questions and share priorities and concerns on key topic areas. We have county staff here from the Planning Division, Parks and Recreation, Department of Parks and Recreation, and the Department of Environmental Services Transportation Division, as well as members of the county's Planning Division, and the applicant team, of course. So first, one note is that we are streaming this presentation via Microsoft Teams, and we are recording the online sessions that will be posted to the project webpage, so community members who could not be here tonight in person can watch it in the future. In addition, the stations you see around the room are mirrored in the online engagement forum, so if you know somebody who could not attend tonight, please encourage them to watch the presentation, submit their questions and comments via the online forum. So we will start the evening with an overview of the Pentagon City Sector Plan. That's going to be presented by Matt in Comprehensive Planning. We are going to also have an overview of the applications, multiple applications that have been submitted by the developer. And then we will have an overview of the public review process. And finally, we will have the applicant present their overall vision for the site. As a reminder to those in the room, we are streaming this presentation, so to ensure everyone can hear, please hold your questions and comments until the next phase of tonight's event. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt. One thing I will say before I do hand it over to Matt is that we're going to have a lot of presenters right now. There are, I think, 5 of us, or perhaps 4 of us, but several of us. And the purpose of this, the reason there are so many presenters this evening, is you're going to see a lot of names and faces, and just giving an opportunity to get to know the county staff team as well as the applicant team and members of the planning commission. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Matt, and he can walk us through the Pentagon City Sector Plan.
Thanks, Matt. Good evening. My name is Matt Suzek. I work with Matt and the other colleagues in planning. And what I wanted to do before we get to the overall presentation and see what's actually been submitted by Jimmy Smith, I think it's really important to highlight a big document that we're going to review the entire proposal over the next few months.
You're mumbling.
You need to speak in.
Can't hear me?
Talk to them.
Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk to them.
So what we're going to do is focus first on the Pentagon City Sector Plan that really go into the document used to review the proposal that's in front of us. So I think some of you have a very clear memory of what that document entails. It is pretty thick, and I think what I wanted to do tonight is at least provide some of the key components of what will be represented in upcoming meetings. So I think as we get into the details and the weeds, you'll start to see some of the exhibits pretty regularly that really depict what our vision was for this site, and then how we assess the proposal that G.G. Smith has submitted to verify if we actually are achieving that vision. The sector plan itself was adopted in February of 2022, and it essentially creates a framework for what type of development you want to see in Pentagon City, including the River House property. It does so through a narrative, some exhibits, some illustrations. Pretty clearly has recommendations about the public space, where buildings need to be located, what type of connectivity we can anticipate, and kind of the interplay between some of the sites in the Pentagon City area here. Those of you that might be accessing this later, there's a link to the actual plan on the bottom right of this image. So if you want to skip through, it's a pretty thick document, but some of the upcoming slides should give you a framework of what to expect. And some of the things that staff has already thus far with the proposal. One of the earlier things you'll find is really the organization of the document. The areas that I'm highlighting here represent the development framework. These are really, where we ended up after 18 months of study, analysis, feedback, feedback, and consensus building, and really grouped into several categories: land use, transportation, public space, and then lastly, site and building form. And as you'll see over the next few slides, these really start to spell out what the expectations are for each property, including River House. Given the size of the River House property, what we wanted to do is really start with the issues starting this fall that are site-wide. Really make sure that the open space network, transportation network, and those bigger topics are addressed first before we get into more specific issues like building architecture or loading access. So you're going to see kind of the orientation and sequencing of those topics as the agendas for the fall. Some of those examples include lot coverage, which in that plan speaks to the percentage of the space that needs to be set aside for vegetation and landscaping, tree canopy, and also the space that's left over, which could be occupied by future buildings. So these are some of the examples, just a flavor of what you can expect to see in our plan as the application is reviewed for compliance. And many of these very exhibits, to J.P. Smith's credit, actually are shown in the proposal, which make it very easy for us to assess if they're reaching the right levels and how do we feel about the totality of that entire site. Some additional elements you can expect: public spaces, whether it be a public park, plaza, pedestrian connectivity, locational ground uses like retail equivalent uses. Those are all things we're going to be looking at both site-wide and also in specific land days, which Adam's going to cover. And the terminology that we use to really break apart this very large site. It's really three key sections: the south, central, and north part of the property. And I think that's going to make it more digestible as we get into future meetings and really break this apart and have some productive conversation. A term that you're going to probably hear very often is the green ribbon. This is really a term that was identified in the planning process for a pedestrian pathway network that was publicly accessible. So as the River House redevelops, there are specific north-south and east-west connections that we wanted to achieve for the greater community that typically relies on this property to navigate the different destinations. We wanted to make sure that as development happened, those connections were realized in the very areas and the very character that we envisioned in that planning process. So this term, green ribbon, is going to surface pretty regularly as we continue to look at those three different portions of the property. Because River House represents approximately 1 mile of this entire network. I think represents about 3 miles in the overall Pentagon City area. So one site in particular is really going to help us deliver on one aspect of that vision. And lastly, there's obviously a lot of transportation and transit assessments. You're going to see a lot of conversations about the bike network, the nature of George Street, given that once property in this case is significant frontage, so we have a really big opportunity to improve that roadway and help us meet the vision of accommodating additional density, but without continuing relying heavily on parks. So how do we do that? By impacting existing and future roadways. What was the character that we envisioned when we adopted the second plan? So again, just kind of giving you a perspective of the list of topics you can anticipate. And all of these have about 20 to 30 pages to themselves in the sector plan. If we want to drill down and figure out what we meant, there's additional exhibits that we'll cover. But I just wanted to kind of create a framework so folks can kind of anticipate the topics to discuss starting in late September. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Adam Watson.
Thank you, Matt. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, my name is Adam Watson. I'm also with Arlington County Planning, and I will be leading the site plan review committee portion of this process. So you'll see me a little bit later on after we conclude LRPC, and I look forward to seeing you, a lot of you along the way, participating in that process. So I'm going to talk just very high level about the applications that Jake filed with the county. To do that, I just wanted to get into a little tiny bit of terminology, just so we're all on the same page about what we're talking about. So the first thing I wanted to do is just differentiate between what a phase development site plan, or PDSP, is, and a final site plan, which I'm going to refer to as a land day. So those two terms being interchangeable in the presentation. So you can think of the phase development site plan as being the entire puzzle, right? And the final site plan is just sort of being one piece of that larger puzzle. So the phase development site plan allows for the coordinated redevelopment of large sites in the form of a general plan or land uses, public facilities, transportation, utilities, etc. It guides future development. It establishes the total density for the site and will also delineate what the final site plan land areas are going to be. Lastly, the sector plan recommended that a river house should be required to submit a PDSP, which the applicant has done, as well. We're talking about that this evening. So the final site plans, drilling down a little bit, these govern the specific building and site design, improvements, permit timing, or given land bay within that PDSP. The approval of the final site plan by the county board is required prior to the issuance of any building permits for any part of the PDSP. In other words, the applicant could not just get approval for a PDSP and not a final site plan and good construction. Lastly, these final site plans typically expire within 3 years if they're not constructed. And thus, the General Assembly takes action to extend the validity of these, which they have sometimes over the past. So to jump right into what the PDSP summary is, as Matt mentioned, they're going to break it down into more digestible pits. So we have 4 total land bays broken down over the PDSP, the south, the central, the north, which a final site plan has not been filed for that area. So I'm not going to be speaking about that tonight in terms of the overall density, but there are these 4 land bays that are proposed for the overall PDSP area. In terms of overall density, the applicant, sorry, this keeps spinning out. The unit that we're using here to measure density is really dwelling units per acre. So the entire site area for the PDSP is about 36 acres. The existing density, which includes the Ashley, the Potomac, James apartment buildings, are all proposed to stay. So that's the existing density you see in the next row down there, 45.8 dwelling units per acre. The sector plan establishes a new base density for the PDSP at 72 dwelling units per acre. It also sets a maximum threshold for the entire site, which is 150 dwelling units per acre. So the applicant is proposing, as you can see the next line down, 92.4 dwelling units per acre. Again, this includes the existing density, and you can see how it's somewhere in between the base density and the maximum density allowed for the site. I'm also noting that there is new retail proposed in the N1 and N2 buildings, which we'll talk to you more in a minute. And then in addition to that, they are proposing 740 units of additional density. This is where community benefits comes into play. This is essentially the difference between what they are proposing and what the base density is at 72 units per acre. Okay, so just running through the land base quickly, and I'll be standing over at the land use section, so if anybody has more questions or comments, you can come find me over there. So the land base is proposed to be townhouse, stacked flats, and built, ranging from 3 to 4 stories in height, a total of 265 dwelling units, and parking is proposed at 0.66 spaces per dwelling unit. Land base, this area includes the Ashley building to remain. And then infill development in this area would be 3 new buildings. C1 is a multifamily residential building, 7 stories tall. You can see it on the top left-hand image there. C2 would be an elder care and senior housing building, is 8 stories tall. And then lastly, the C3 multifamily condominium residential building that's also 7 stories. This part of this final site plan or part of the PDSP is also delineated to show the realigned segment of South Joy Street and also the expansion of Virginia Highlands Park, which would be dedicated to the county fee simple. Lastly, I'll talk about Land Bay Inn, just the furthest north. This is going to include the Potomac and James buildings to remain, and the new infill development here is 2 mixed-use buildings. N1, which is further to the south, is multifamily on top of ground floor retail, 551 units, about 14,000 square feet of retail, parked at 0.5 spaces per dwelling unit for residential, and then 1 parking space per 1,000 square feet for the retail. And then N2, which is slightly smaller building, is 401 units with about 13,000 square feet of retail, also parked at the same ratio as the other building of 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit, 1,000 square feet, one space per 1,000 square feet for retail. This land bay also includes the South Joy streetscape, which would include the streetscape and the protected two-way light facilities that are recommended in the sector plan that Matt spoke to previously. So that's the high-level overview of what we've received from JP Smith so far. At this point, I'm going to turn the microphone back over to Matt Pfeiffer. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. So the next segment, I'm going to talk to one slide that gives just a sort of an overview of what the review process is going to look like. This is, as Adam just explained, this is a very large site, probably the largest site that we've looked at since. Sorry, thanks, Jim. Probably the largest site that I've worked working on since I started at Arlington County. There's a fairly complicated review process, so there are a number of moving parts. I'll go through those, and then I'm going to hand it off to Jim Lantelmi with the Planning Commission, and he will go through both the Long-Range Planning Committee process and the Site Plan Review Committee process. We'll talk about what each of those entail. So, in terms of the overall outline, and I've tried to color code this for ease of understanding. So here we are on the 26th of July at the community kickoff meeting, and again, we all know what the purpose of this is. Since this is a phased development site plan, this will be reviewed by the Long Range Planning Committee. We are factoring in 2 meetings. It could be more than that, or if everything is perfect, it could be 1 meeting. But it will likely be 2 meetings. We have dates for those meetings at this time. The first is on September 27th. The second would be October 24th. Those are somewhat fungible. They could change as we get closer to those dates, but those are what we have penciled in right now. We will obviously send out notices to the community prior to those meetings to make sure everybody has those saved dates. Following Long Range Planning Committee, we would do an SPRC online engagement. And the idea there is we would send an email blast out to participants. There would be an online forum. There would be presentations prepared by both staff and the applicant that you can review and leave your comments online. Those will be tallied by us and tabulated, and those will, all of the responses to that online engagement will be available on the project webpage. Following that, or actually most likely during the period of the online engagement, we would be looking to have a site walking tour. And so again, look out for information on that. Those 2 events are likely to occur simultaneously. Following that, we'll go into Site Plan Review Committee meetings. And for those of you who know there's sort of a standard set agenda for Site Plan Review Committee, since this is such a large site, what we will be doing is looking at the whole site altogether. So rather than looking at 1 land bay, 1 meeting, and then another land bay in the next meeting, we will be looking at building architecture for all land bays in the first meeting. The second meeting is likely to be transportation for the entire transportation, circulation, building services for the entire PDSP area, and so on. So in terms of just preliminary timeframes, if everything goes perfectly, we are looking at late fall for those the online engagement and walking tour. The first few SPRC meetings, a couple of SPRC meetings, likely early winter, and looking to conclude SPRC by next spring. Go into public hearings again. If everything goes swimmingly, by late spring 2024. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jim to talk about the LRPC process.
Thank you, Matt. And as you mentioned, I'm Jim Lantelmi. I'm a member of the Planning Commission, and I'm chair of the Long Range Planning Committee, which raises the question, what is a Long Range Planning Committee? A little bit of inside baseball, of course. It's a committee of the planning commission that holds meetings in public with invited stakeholder representatives. Meetings are hybrid. The participants are online or in person. That raises the question, what does an LRPC do? It does a high-level review of whether a proposed use for a site is within the realm of possibility under the applicable county planning documents. Saw one of them tonight. There are others. For the River House site, that means it will consider whether the applicant's proposals are possible under the general land use plan, the GLUP or CLUP. There's definitely a lot of abbreviations here, because you've already probably figured it out. Under the GLUP, also the Pentagon City's sector plan, which was recently approved by the county board, and the phase development site plan, that's the PDSP. These all cover this site. Well, who participates in LRPC? All the members of the planning commission, there's currently 12. Other county commissions, such as the transportation, housing, parks and recreation, except we have pedestrian advisory, she would be here too. CTV too. We have people here for that. So we have a number of commissions that can be there also. The surrounding civic associations, there are 3 of them for this site. And of course, the applicant property owner. Well, that raises the question, how can I be heard in this process, given that there's limited people who are at the table, we call at the table? Well, there's always time set aside for public comment. I would say almost always, but since I'll be running it, there will be time set aside at the end. 1 to 2 minutes for members of the public who wish to speak and do so. You can also make written comments to the county staff at any time, and they will become part of the record. Also, through your civic association. And we will, I don't know if we have representatives here from Aurora Highlands, Arlington Ridge, Crystal City. Maybe you could identify yourselves. So you can look. 1, 2, okay, great, you're here, excellent. These are the people, your fellow citizens, your neighbors, that you can talk to, because one of these people or another representative from each of these civic associations will be represented at each of these meetings. They will be active. In the past, they've been very active. So they're the people you need to get hold of. Also, if you belong to a condo in this area, your HOA will be at the table too. So if you are living in one of the condominiums that are around this site, they will be invited. So you will get a representative from your HOA, from your condo association, so talk to them too. They will be here. These are all the various ways you can be heard. Now, what LRPC is not, there are things that we will not talk about during the LRPC meeting. We will not be talking about architecture. We will not be talking about the form that the open spaces or the public spaces will be taking. We won't get particularly getting into specific site configurations, though we'll be seeing that. We're sort of looking at what it could be like. We won't be talking about construction, phases of construction, or who to contact if there's a problem. Those are the later meetings, which I guess we're going to move into that. That's the Site Plan Review Committee, SPRC. Commissioner Daniel Weir was going to be here. He is running late, so I will jump in there on that. So, get his slide up, I guess. Okay, the Site Plan Review Committee process. We can get a little bit here, but I've been to quite a number of them. As you saw, we're planning to have 4. Typically, it's 1 to 3, but in more complex sites such as this one, given how large it is, we're going to be going to 4. We'll have an agenda that's posted ahead of time. Same people who are at the table at the LRPC will be at the SPRC. This is where the rubber hits the road and you get into the detail. They will be looking at the design, the architecture, the massing. We'll be looking at transportation. And transportation means not just parking, it also means bike facilities, the sidewalks, the interconnect, the connectivity between these blocks and the surrounding blocks. The green ribbon, that all falls under pick up and drop off. Where's the pizza guy going to drop off the stuff? The loading docks, where are those going to be located? You really get into these very fine details when it comes to SBRC. Often these are the things that the neighborhoods are most interested in. That's why we have the SBRCs. And I'm warning you, it will not come up in LRPC. So if you want to talk about that stuff, it won't come up in LRPC. But we'll get into some transit parks. If there's any open space that will be devoted to the public, that will be discussed at the SBRC. Affordable housing, what sort of affordable housing commitments are going to be made? Will it be writing checks? Will it be on site? Will it be units that are nearby? All of that will be discussed. Their areas. So it covers, and then of course implementation. And some very close to the neighborhoods. What's the phasing proposed to be? Where the workers going to park? How are the trucks delivering all the materials going to come in? Who's going to be the contact person when you're woken up because of the pounding of the pile drivers it's a weekday? What are the hours of the construction going to be limited to? And if there's going to be changes, who do you talk to? So that all comes up at the SBRC. As Matt mentioned, there is an agenda. We're going to be doing a little bit differently here because all 4 of the areas will be covered at once. And it's going to be a heavy lift. So stuff is posted online ahead of time. Definitely want to read that because you come armed with questions. One of the first things we do, what are clarifying questions? Please go around the room. What questions do you have? And since the applicant is there, the staff are there, you can ask them right away. Why is the loading dock over here? Does that make sense? How come the parking ratio is only 0.6? Shouldn't there be more? Shouldn't there be less? They can give answers to that right there. That's how the SBRC process works. Once that is done, it then moves on, all 4 meetings, let's say. We then will be moving on to commissions. Planning Commission, Transportation Commission, probably be shopping with the Housing Commission, C2E2, Parks and Recreation, and any other ones that come up. Only because a lot of commissions. But we all will make recommendations that will then go to the county board, or the county board then makes their final decision on the particular application. So, did I miss anything?
Oh, that was great.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, that's how it all works, and I just hold it back.
So we have one final slide. What we will do though is actually pause right here before we do breakout, and I'm going to attempt to bring up the applicant's presentations. So that I got that. Faison, I can get. Hold on. Yeah, because I'm logging on here. I have a whole presentation.
That's totally fine. Just had the new one had the nice big picture of the graphs, but it's all
Excuse the technical difficulties. So I'm going to introduce Faison Qureshi from the applicant team, and he's going to go through the applicant's vision for the site, and then we'll come back and I'll do an explanation before we break out into groups. So Faison.
Thanks, Matt. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi, for that great comprehensive overview. Can everyone hear me okay? I tend to talk loud when I'm nervous, so maybe that'll help facilitate things. First off, I want to extend my gratitude and appreciation for all of you coming out on a Wednesday evening to hear us speak. It's great to see a lot of friendly, familiar faces, maybe a couple not so friendly ones. Joking. For those whom I haven't met, for the new faces here, my name is Faison Qureshi. I'm an associate on the development team at JVG Smith. I'm actually joined tonight with my colleagues, Matt Gittiman, who's in the back, was lucky enough to lose a blazer, and then Greg Faber as well. We also have a number of folks from our design team, sort of clustered around where Greg is sitting. Gina flew in from Seattle, Janet from Baltimore, so props to them for showing up. We are really, really excited to really officially kick off the public engagement process with the county. I think excited is a little bit of an understatement. But before we sort of dive into our vision for the plan, and Adam sort of gave a really great comprehensive overview of our actual plans, we thought it would be important to sort of talk through what our vision was, what helped inform those plans. And it's really the 8 guiding principles that you see up on the screen. I won't bore you with going through each and every single one of them. You can catch our poster recording on the website probably later this week if you want to bore yourselves to sleep and hear all 8 of them. But the 3 I want to really hit on, first and foremost, listen and engage. So hot on the heels of the sector plan adoption in February of last year, we really had and started a number of these types of meetings. I think at last count we had over 20 of these, everything from open houses to a site walk in the blazing July heat last year. Some of you remember that. We had informal coffee chats. We even had a taco truck night. And the purpose of those, besides having fun and meeting all of you, was to really hear what's important to the community before we even brought the design team on board, before we even brought pen to paper. And we heard a number of things during these meetings that helped inform our plans. But the 2 that we heard sort of consistently over and over again was, 1, a desire for a mix of heights, and then 2, a request for a diversity of housing, which seems to be lacking in the neighborhood as of now. So those 2 things really guided our development plans, our design team, and it was sort of the ethos that we carried in throughout our plans. Of course, we're preserving the existing high-rise apartment buildings, but we're also adding mid-rise multifamily buildings. We're adding a senior housing building. We're adding for-sale condos. We're adding, over 200 townhomes that, taper on down towards the single-family neighborhood at Aurora Highlands. So we, took those 2 guiding principles throughout the site. So with that, we're really excited to continue these conversations, not just tonight at the open house stations, but also, sort of throughout the coming months as part of LRPC, SPRC, all the community engagement sessions that we're going to have. So I really encourage all of you to reach out to us, reach out to the design team, continue providing us your thoughts, tell us what we can improve on, tell us what you'd like, hopefully more of the latter than the former. But we really appreciate the time folks have voluntarily spent to review our plans and provide really thoughtful feedback. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Murphy Antoine. Murphy is with Torty Gallus & Partners. He's been a great partner on this project, no pun intended. Torty Gallus is a local DC-based architecture firm. They're serving as a landlady and architect, as well as the master planning architect. Thank you all for your time.
Great, thanks, Faison. Everybody hear me okay? Which arrow? Do a test. So again, I'm Murphy Antoine. I'm an architect and planner with Torty Gallus & Partners. We're part of the JVG Smith team on the master planning end. And I wanted at a very high level to pick up on some of the things that Adam presented and talk about the master plan and really the transformation of the existing river house. So what you see on the screen now is the plan of River House as it exists today. Again, 36 acres just north of Pentagon Row and Virginia Highlands, in between Lynn and Joyce and Army Navy and Aurora Highlands. 3 towers moving from right to left, the James, the Potomac, the Ashley. They range from 13 stories to 16 stories, and they're arranged or sit in between a whole lot of surface parking asphalt that you see on this plan. So our transformation is really picking up on the sector plan, respecting those 3 towers and infilling in between them to make a more connected neighborhood to the surrounding context. The sector plan, as was described earlier, really picks up. Back on? Really picks up. Really picks up on some big themes that were pointed to earlier. The connectivity that you see here in a couple of different colors with these dotted ranges, the connectivity of streets and vehicular path, and even more important, the connectivity of the green ribbon, this pedestrian, publicly accessible network of natural paths through the site, east and west, north and south, and the open space, which you see in the light green on this plan. Those as really guiding principles throughout the sector plan for Pentagon City and woven through River House. Again, earlier we described the three areas, the south portion, the central portion in between the Ashley and the Potomac, and the north portion in between the Potomac and the James. So again, you can sort of see those as the land base, the different options for a range of building types that's arrayed along those areas. In that abstract kind of diagram of areas for development and connectivity with the green ribbon, connectivity with streets, and the development areas, this is the proposed plan. You can start to see the footprints of townhomes and stacked flats to the south, the left of this plan, the infill with the mid-rise multifamily buildings, condo, senior in the central parcel, and then the two parcels with ground floor retail across from Pentagon Row, and the really key connection part of this green ribbon that gets you to and from the top of the hill down to the metro and back and forth that way. This is a two-dimensional site plan representation of that. If you start to extrude that and look at that in 3 dimensions, going back to the sector plan guidance for maximum heights, you see that tapering down from right to left with the sector plan maximum heights up to 250 feet down to 4 stories as it's adjacent to Aurora Islands. And then you take, if you can remember back to the proposed site plan, you can see the proposed extruded volumes that happen within that sector plan height, but really carved down and carved back to that, to this mid-range 7 and 8 stories that you see to the right, and the 3 and 4 story townhomes and stacked flats that you see all again within between the towers of the Ashley James. That is it. Going to get back over to Matt at this point. So that's a very high level description to be available to talk in more detail about the parcels of the over.
Hey, thank you so much, JVG Smith, applicant team. Like I said, I have one more slide. We're just going to talk about what the next stage of this meeting will be. Here we go. So I have a script for this. So we're going to open our stations in the room. As you can see, we have a land use station, a transportation station, a public space station, and then a general station. That if you have just any random thoughts, you can go up to the general station and write right on there. Welcome to begin at any station you like. There are no rules. There are staff facilitators at each station to answer your question and your top priorities, your key concerns. There's a note taker at each station that will capture your comments and questions on the flip chart. You are also welcome to write down your thoughts on post-it notes and place them on the flip chart. There will also be an applicant representative at each station to answer questions. Please feel free to move through the stations at your own pace and stop at as many or as few as you like. So with that, why don't we break out and go talk to some folks. One thing before we do, please provide feedback focused on your broad aspirations or broad areas of concern. The focus here is not necessarily to get too far into the weeds, as you heard Jim explain quite eloquently. We will be doing that between LRPC and SPRC. Right here, what we want to hear from you is what are your broad aspirations? What do you want this site to be like? And what are your areas of concern? What's keeping better? So with that, let's break out.
You want to just mention those online?
Yes, of course. For those online that are joining us online, there will be an online engagement that will be launched shortly. That is meant to mirror the breakout stations, so there will be questions on land use, transportation, and public space. So please stay on the line if you are joining us online, and you will be given a link to that online engagement. Please, answer at your leisure. That online engagement actually is going to be left up for the month of August. So if you're here today, you forgot something, you can go back to the project website and find that online engagement and type it in there. So with that, Breakout. Thanks, everyone.
All of it. I think. Oh, that one.
Yeah, like a shirt. Yeah. Nice.
Stand over there, Mike.
Moving like this.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, I'm really good. Nice to meet you.
Oh, nice, okay. Next door neighbors. Been there for a while? Yeah. Were you in Arlington? Like Arlington better?
I think I'm the note taker.
Are you there?
But I really like it.
You both got the post
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
Good, nice. Do you have any feedback on the plans? Like, were you able to take a look
I was just telling you that I was so pleased that.
Oh, no, we got him, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I'll still be able to.
Okay. Yeah, we went up to one of your neighbors on New Year's. They have chicken
When you go out.
I can only imagine what like life.
I get to. I'm
Susan, pleasure to meet you.
That's right, I didn't wait.
I came with my wife and daughter. We made the mistake. We were like we stayed too far up front, so like the apartment building.
Maybe the best
As soon as they started walking, we see them, and then we just made a scramble and that dash.
Talking about the March, the wrap up of the second plan?
No, I'm talking
Yeah,
about
previous iteration.
of the whole shebang.
When we had that.
When we had here.
Yeah,
Or was
so
that September?
I'm gonna make a judgment call, but I would say things that you would have to squint to see. So in Gina and her first parcel in the south among the townhouses.
Yeah.
There's been a little bit of shifting of roads and some of the pathways. You would have to squint to see that.
Probably did.
That's gonna be a lot nicer than it is today.
The engineering issues.
Right. And topography, can we really get a wheelchair up here?
Well, yeah, well, because.
No, that's gonna be a really cool apartment building. It's like a very generous, like,
So
it's not wheelchair rideable. Then we have another route to get up there. We can make the representation.
How are you?
Yeah.
Right, I understand.
Things like total amount of units, height, amount of open space, green ribbon connections.
Oh, yeah.
The same, as you would have seen in marketing. They shifted it over.
Renters, you've got families, these are townhouses.
We haven't actually designed those spaces yet, but it is our intention to rehab those spaces.
Throughout the city. And actually, the landscape architects who are over at the public spaces are great to talk to.
What we've done now is we said these are those spaces, but we haven't actually put in.
We have our challenges, and we talked a little bit around it. Because it's such a big site, it's hard to see those details in the plans, where you're looking at all 36 angles. So we need to zoom in pieces. It's the way it really comes together. People's minds,
Right, and you have to, remember, usually mine's pretty good, but it ain't.
and not across 36 acres.
No.
But some of the renderings, like on the south parts of building playgrounds.
Scale of things. So I think that is one of our challenges moving forward, how to actually break down the site plan and better idea.
Understand what it is.
The whole and the pieces make sense.
So I've been, this pieces and getting some of the.
You would never think, because it's like, for me, K Street is furnished by memories, that's what it's interesting hearing about the alternate history. So were you on
And
like
even
the
if you only
actual
get
like psychiatric side?
that's what we're trying to do. But in out of the community, so they're all put together. To be able to reach people. And the electronic stuff is not reliable.
So it's a younger.
Flyers and elevators.
Yeah. So because of they started that like
It is. Yeah.
So
And you walk.
so